On my birthday, my daughter promised a big family dinner. I showed up in my best suit, only to find the restaurant fully booked under her husband's name, with my credit card. I just sat down and ate anyway. I want you to tell me where you are listening from before we go any further. Your street? Your city? Your midnight shift? Your quiet kitchen after everyone is asleep? Because this is a story about place, and about a man learning to take his place back without raising his voice. It begins with a door that smelled like rain, with glass that showed me my own face like a warning, and with the soft blue glow of a host's tablet that turned my birthday into a test. My daughter had promised a big family dinner, quiet and warm, and I had believed her because I was still the kind of father who believed the last good thing a child said, even if the next thing hurt. While the host typed, the screen light changed the lines of his face the way a lantern changes a room. He said, "Private booking," and when I gave him my daughter's name, he shook his head with a kind sort of regret. He said, "Blake Ethan, my son-in-law," and then he glanced at a note and added, "Deposit on a card ending in 1172, which is the last four of my card, the one my wife chose for us years ago because it gave points for groceries and little treats." I looked through the glass wall into a private room where linen flared under candlelight, and a photographer's flash turned smiles into white bars, and I found my daughter standing between her husband and his parents, as if she were the hyphen that joined their names. I could hear a laugh that wasn't joy. It was the sound people make when they are part of a picture they think will matter later. The smoke from the kitchen pressed against the glass, and the river smelled like metal and rain. It was my birthday, and for a second it felt like everyone but me had been told. I did not clear my throat. I did not bang a glass. I poured myself water, felt the cold travel through the stem the way a warning travels through the body, and broke the bread the server had just set down. Good bread tells the truth. It told me someone back there cared. Ethan stopped mid-story when he noticed me, weighed the value of a greeting, and then chose to pretend we were strangers on a train who would never speak again. Mira slid in beside me with the small, nervous smile she uses when she wants to be kind and also invisible. She pressed her fingers on my shoulder the way she did when she was little, and needed to anchor herself, and whispered, "Dad, it's more work crowd than family. We'll do dessert with you after." Her eyes didn't hold mine. They drifted to a partner in a navy suit who had just arrived with the right haircut and the wrong laugh. The maitre d' watched all this from the doorway, chin tipped lower than a nod, like a man who had been told a rumor about me long ago and was testing its weight tonight. The host slid a little card neatly beside my plate that read, "Balance pre-approved," and underneath it, the last four of my cards again, a tidy humiliation in an elegant font. Across the table, Ethan's mother smiled with her lips and not her eyes, and Ethan's father leaned in with cologne like pepper and said, "You don't mind footing the bill for the next generation, do you?" He said, "generation," as if the word only traveled in one direction, and as if I wasn't the one who taught my daughter to tie her shoes and tune a violin. I said, "Depends how you define it," and tasted the soup the server placed in front of me, because the kitchen deserved to be respected no matter what the room did. Lemon, dill, a bitter green like early spring. Good soup for a cold night. Ethan, loud enough to be overheard, told the sommelier, "We'll do the 96, and held his chin at an angle like money is a muscle. I signed the tasting sheet for the cellar bottle with my full name. The sommelier saw it, and his posture changed the way a flag changes when the wind turns. Before I tell you what line I held, let me take you back to a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and dish soap, where the window coat of winter ice drew little maps while we waited for the kettle. It was another birthday years ago, the year the heater coughed like an old man and the violin Mira loved needed a bridge we could barely afford. Sana, my wife, wore the apron with tiny lemons stitched along the hem, and she balanced a cake with candles that bent because we had bought them on sale and they were already a little tired. Mira wore a crown we made from a brown paper bag and glitter glue, and she sang like a trumpet while we clapped offbeat. I had sold an old watch to pay for a doctor visit for Sana, and when she asked me if I missed it, I told her I had always kept time by her laugh anyway. We cut the cake with a butter knife, and the frosting pulled like taffy, and I made a promise aloud over those crumbs. No matter what the years tried to take, I would make the table feel full. When Sana's illness came, it carried boxes of nights that looked like winter without windows. I learned to braid hair, to make broth, to pretend cheer inside the pharmacy smell, to stand up straight so our daughter could lean on something that did not tilt. When Sana died, the house exhaled a sound so soft you would miss it unless you had ever listened to a sleeping child breathe and wondered if the next breath would come. I stood at the kitchen table, put both palms flat, and repeated the promise. Sometimes you say a vow twice, so it can hear you. Design is the word I use for what happened 15 years before that night by the river, when a young chef named Elena sat at my kitchen table and drew menus on butcher paper with a pencil tucked into her hair. The bank had said no, because banks prefer numbers that already bloomed. She had a dish in her head called Pine and Smoke that was supposed to taste like standing in the woods at dusk, with a cold, clean smell in your hair and a warm plate in your hands. Sana brewed her tea, listened until the room got quiet enough for hope, and asked, "What should the room smell like when people sit down? What should the first bite make them remember?" Elena said, "Home, but braver." I wrote the first check with savings that showed bone, and I told her to keep my name out of the press and my face out of the photographs, because I liked my privacy the way I liked my coffee, strong and simple. When she signed the lease later, I put the majority of the building holding company in a structure that didn't need my face. Clean shares, boring clauses, but sturdy like a chair you can stand on. We wrote 3 words in plain English that mattered more than any gloss: conduct, discretion, right of comp. Sana insisted on the last one because she understood that generosity without structure turns into debt, and debt collects interest in embarrassment. "If you help someone," she said, "help them in a way that will hold when you are tired, when you are sad, and when someone tries to pull the cloth from the table." That is how my name ended up on paper nobody bragged about, and how a place where people posted their plates also answered to a quiet man who still kept time by the sound of a laugh he could no longer hear. Back in the private room, Ethan flagged the maitre d' with a flick that would have offended a fly. "He is not on the guest list," he said, meaning me, in the voice men use when they think rules only live to protect them. The maitre d' kept his eyes level and looked to me. "I did not make anyone choose sides with a public scene," I said. "Serve the table, please. And send my compliments to Chef Elena. Names have weight." The room shifted, a millimeter at first. People who read magazines knew her. People who knew restaurants knew that some names hang together in the air. Ethan said, a little louder than necessary, "Compliments aren't currency," and a few men laughed the way men laugh when they want to be seen agreeing. I sipped my wine, tasted cedar and stone and the kind of patience that turns grapes into memory, and said, very evenly, "You were mistaken. Here they are." Then I excused myself as politely as a man asks for the salt and walked to the corridor to make a call I had not needed to make for years. Elena answered on the 3rd ring, and I could hear the kitchen behind her like a song that only uses drums. "How's Pine and Smoke?" I asked, because I like to begin at the beginning. "Better when you are in the house," she said. "Are you?" "I am," I said. "And your majority partner needs the right of comp. Move this party to house. Remove the name Blake from the booking. Release the private room after main course unless a family member requests to hold it." She said, "As you wish," in a voice that carried respect without ceremony. Then softer, "Happy birthday, Sana's man." I put my phone away and went back to my seat, because when you know a room will change, there is no need to shout at the furniture. The manager approached with the calm that only comes from training and truth. "Compliments of the house," he said to the table. Not to Ethan. "All charges are moved to house at the majority partner's discretion." A place like that knows how to make a sentence land without making a mess. Conversation stumbled, then resumed in a different key. Some partners stared at their plates and discovered they had run out of appetite. Ethan blinked at the manager, like the words might rearrange if he glared hard enough. "Why?" he asked. "At the majority partner's discretion," the manager repeated, and his pause was not empty. It was respectful. I lifted my hand slightly and added, "Please send a 2nd Pine and Smoke to table 7. The manager nodded like a man who had practiced that nod in a mirror and left. Mira's eyes found me then, the way a key finds its way home by touch alone. She saw something she had not seen in me for a while, or maybe she saw what had always been there and had simply been standing behind her to catch her if she tipped. When the main room reclaimed the private space, there was an odd little ballet that told me everything about character without a single speech. A junior associate in a too-tight suit tried to crack a joke and then stopped when no one laughed. Ethan's mother folded her napkin into sharp corners, as if she could press the evening back into shape. Ethan's father stood with his phone in his hand, pretending to check a message while his eyes counted faces, tallying loyalties like chips. A partner in a pinstripe asked the manager in a confidential tone whether there was any chance the private room could remain for the principals, and the manager said, "Family may retain it," and looked at me as if he were reading the word from a dictionary that remembered older definitions. I turned to the table and said, "Your guests are welcome to make themselves comfortable in the main dining room," and the words were clean and left no residue. Ethan said, a little hoarse, "You can't do this." I looked at him the way you look at rain when you have already chosen to walk. "Not today, Ethan," I said. No anger in it, only a line drawn with chalk that has been in a pocket for years, warming to the hand that is ready to use it. He looked around for a laugh he could borrow and found none. The private room was released the way a ship is unmoored, not in anger, but in obedience to a tide that had always been there. I have been asked how those clauses came to be so exact, and the real answer is grief. After Sana died, I discovered how many people are kind in public and careless in private, and how easy it is for a promise to fray when it is not written down. I spent long evenings at our kitchen table with a pad of yellow paper and a pen that left a thin groove because I pressed too hard. I listed what mattered to us and then I wrote rules for protecting it, plain words, the kind that stand up in storms. Conduct was first. It means the room is safe, no matter who walks in wearing perfume and an agenda. Discretion was second. It means secrets stay where they should, and gratitude does not need applause. Right of comp was third. It means generosity is not a stage, it is a tool. I took those notes to a lawyer who valued plain English, and she smiled like I had brought her a recipe card in my mother's handwriting. She turned my notes into clauses without holes. Elena read them and said, "These are the bones," and Sana kissed my cheek and said, "Now feed the room." I built other small structures too. A trust that would keep my daughter safe from any hand that confused love with ownership. A line of credit for a young man who claimed he loved my daughter, with a guarantor clause that let me close the door if the man treated her safety like a suggestion. A charitable fund that would put knives and books in the hands of students who had more hunger than tuition. None of this was glamorous. All of it was a way of staying married to Sana's idea of kindness long after she was gone. People tell you grief is an absence. Sometimes grief is a guardrail you build, so the next car does not go over the edge you now know is there. Inside the closed room, after the noise fell to a hum like a distant train, I asked for dessert for 3 and a few minutes alone. Ethan hovered like a man who wanted to stay long enough to prove something, but not long enough to hear it. I took 3 envelopes from my inside pocket and set them in a row on the linen. The first I slid to my daughter. It was the trust I had built when I still believed marriage would be a harbor for her, not a storm. A spendthrift trust with her name, with protections that meant she would never want, but no spouse would ever spend her future for a short-term win. Sana's note was photocopied in the margin from the original, for Mira's future, protected. Ethan said, "So I'm the villain," and I shook my head. "You are a man," I said, "and men make choices. This is me making mine." The second envelope was my will, revised last week in ink that had not yet fully settled in my own heart. The house, the letters, the cedar chest Sana's father built, the piano whose keys she dusted one by one because that is how she believed dust is defeated. Those were hers. My shares in the holding company stayed where they belonged, tied to the kitchen that fed people and the staff whose hands made sauce and carried plates with the balance of dancers. "You inherit home," I told Mira, "not a purse for someone else's plan." The third envelope was thinner and heavier than the others. The termination notice for the line of credit that had lifted Ethan's firm when it was a plan written on a whiteboard. He had never known my name stood beside his on the guarantor line like a quiet brace. "Effective midnight," I said. Settle what you owe or explain yourself to investors who do not share a bed with my daughter. He said, you wouldn't. And I let the briefest smile out, a thing like a folded knife. I already did. There was a soft knock then, and Elena entered with a small cake balanced on a plate that looked like porcelain moonlight. 2 candles. She set it down without ceremony and said, 1 for the year you earned. 1 for Sana. On the rim, in chocolate script, she had written, for family. The smell was pine and sugar, and a memory of smoke. People think closure is a loud door. Often it is a plate set down with care. Mira cut the cake the way her mother taught her, steady hand, small slices, the first piece to whoever looks the most tired. She gave that first piece to me, and I laughed a one-breath laugh, not because it was funny, but because my body remembered how to feel light for a second. Ethan stood very still, eyes on the door like a man who isn't sure if he is leaving a room or being left by it. I slid 1 final card across the table to him with a number on it for counsel. If you harass my daughter or use my name as a key again, I said, the conduct clause triggers in places you do not even know have doors. He did not answer. He left without slamming the door. It is a small skill to leave without breaking the hinge. Small skills matter when you are learning who you are. We ate cake. We did not make speeches. We breathed. We listened to the river find its slow voice outside the window. And for the first time that night, the room felt like it belonged to my wife's idea of family again. Later that week, Mira came to my apartment with a bag of groceries and a face that looked both older and younger than it had 3 days before. We made dinner like we used to, chopping vegetables to the rhythm of the radio, sharing the cutting board without speaking about it. She said sorry in the only way that mattered. She asked me to taste the soup and listened when I told her it needed more salt. After we ate, she asked for the long version of the story about Elena at our kitchen table, and I told it slow, including the parts where the bank said no and where your mother said yes loud enough for 2. We washed dishes by hand, and she dried the glasses and asked why I had kept the will quiet until I changed it. I said, because I wanted to believe I could trust the room you brought home with you. She nodded and did not defend anyone. She asked me if the trust meant she was a child. I said it meant she was loved. She told me she would handle her own future, and I said I knew, and that the trust was a floor, not a leash. We spoke about counseling like you talk about weather coming, calm, prepared, not panicked. When she left, she hugged me like a person who had remembered something, not like a person who had been convinced. The next day, she went to the restaurant alone and sat by the window with a book. She ate pine and smoke without taking a picture and left a note on the bill. Tastes like the house at dusk. Elena sent me a photo of the note. I printed it and put it with old grocery lists and a paper crown from a long-ago cake and a napkin with Sana's lipstick faint on the edge. Some boxes hold more oxygen than others. In the months that followed, Ethan's firm adjusted to living without a line of credit that felt like an invisible parent. Some of his partners stayed. Some drifted, as partners do when they discover the wind was coming from a different direction than they thought. He called me once to ask for a meeting. I agreed because refusal can be pride in a different suit. We sat at a coffee shop that served drinks in thick white cups that made every hand look honest. He said, "You embarrassed me," and I said, "You embarrassed yourself," and we let the sentence sit like a coin on the table. He asked why I did not shout that night, why I did not make it clear. I said, clarity is not volume. Clarity is a contract, and how you carry yourself. He admitted he had used my concierge profile because it was there, and because the card made everything smoother, and he smiled like he wanted me to admire efficiency. I asked him what kind of husband builds a celebration by erasing the father of the woman he says he loves. He didn't have an answer that could stand up to the daylight between us. I told him men can learn, and that apologies do not grow on branches by themselves. You have to water the tree. He said he would try. I said I hoped he would for his own sake as much as hers. We paid our own bills and left our cups on the saucers the way men do who understand that someone else will have to wash them. Afterward, I sat on a bench by the river and watched a barge carry steel down toward the harbor, slow and determined. I thought about the difference between carrying weight and throwing it. After that night, life did not turn into a parade. It turned into work, which is better. Lawyers spoke in paragraphs made of stones. Papers moved like winter rivers, slow and then all at once. Mira practiced the sentences that adult life demands. No, said cleanly. Yes, said carefully. Not yet, said without apology. She came back to the restaurant on a quiet Wednesday with a paperback book and sat by the window without posting a picture for strangers. She ordered pine and smoke and wrote one more note. Tell the kitchen the smoke tastes kinder now. I walked past the place sometimes without going in, content to see the lights steady and the staff moving with the balance of people who know where everything is. At home, I opened the cedar chest Sana's father built and added to our small archive, that note of Mira's. The chocolate plate with Elena's handwriting from the 2-candle cake. A photograph that caught the exact second my wife had straightened my lapel with both palms and smiled like she was ironing hope into the cloth. In the evenings, I learned to cook slowly again, letting broths do their quiet boiling while I read letters we wrote when we were too young to know why we would need them later. I kept my promises the way you keep a garden. Nothing flashy, everything patient, ready to pull weeds without anger and to plant what feeds the people you love. People asked me whether I missed the kind of birthday with noise. I told them noise is easy. Warmth is a craft. Now and then people ask if I regret not making a scene that night, if the calm cost me satisfaction. I tell them the same simple truth every time. Raising your voice teaches other people how to defend themselves. Holding your ground teaches them how to behave. I did not want to win a moment. I wanted to fix a pattern. My daughter learned that love can be firm without being cruel, that money is a tool and not a leash, that the names on the menu matter less than the hands passing the plates. The staff learned that the rules on the wall were not decorations. The partners learned that access is not the same thing as respect. I learned again that promises you make in kitchens last longer than claims you make in rooms with photographers. I still polish the same cufflinks on the morning of my birthday, not because I need to be shiny, but because ritual is a way of speaking to the parts of yourself that remember. I still straighten my jacket with both palms the way Sana did, not because the jacket needs it, but because I do. I still keep the table set for one more than we expect, because a chair is not only a seat, it is an invitation. And if you are reading this and thinking about a night you kept your voice low and your head high, I want you to know you were not weak. You were learning how to draw a line in clean chalk. If you are still with me, tell me where you are listening from, because I want to imagine you there. The bus jerking over a pothole, the office fridge humming after midnight, the baby finally asleep and the house breathing softer, while I say the last plain thing I know. You do not have to beg for a chair when the chair is yours. You do not have to shatter a glass to be heard. You can show up in your best suit because you respect yourself, not because you need anyone to clap. You can sit down when you have been told you are not on the list, because the list is not the law and the law is not the truth. And the truth is this: dignity is a quiet room you carry with you. If someone tries to spend your name like a card, take the card back, cancel the line, rewrite the will, and then eat your dinner while it is still warm. Look people in the eye and speak in sentences that end where they should. Not today, you can say, and the room will hear it, even if the loudest voice pretends not to. Remember that families do not take what is yours and tell you you are not welcome. Families make room and remember who set the table. Remember that grief can teach you structure, and structure can protect joy. Remember that a dish called pine and smoke can taste like the edge of a forest and the inside of a promise at the same time. Remember that a candle for the year you earned and a candle for the person you lost can stand together on the same plate without dimming each other. On the next anniversary of my birthday, I walked the river early before the city put on its noise. The water looked like folded metal, and the gulls argued with a patience I envied. I wore the same cufflinks, because ritual is a way of telling time that grief cannot steal. I passed the restaurant while the lights were still off and the line cooks were waking the burners, and I knocked once on the alley door like a man who knows the map. Elena opened with a spoon in her hand and laughed when she saw me, because some friendships need no explanation. We stood in the doorway with the cold on our cheeks and shared a small coffee that tasted like discipline. I gave her an envelope for the scholarship fund in Sana's name and another for the staff pool. And I said, use them where the room is thinnest, she said. That's where you always point. Before I left, I walked through the dining room while the tables were still bare wood, all promise. I touched the back of the chair where I had sat that night and felt a quiet thrum. as if the grain remembered. Memory lives in things as much as in people, I breathed, counted to 10 the way Sana taught me when anger tried to outrun wisdom, and stepped back into the morning. On the sidewalk, a boy helped his grandmother push a grocery cart with one stubborn wheel, and I held the door. She thanked me, and, not knowing a thing about me, told me to eat something sweet on my birthday. I did. I bought a small pastry from the corner shop and ate it standing up in the cold, and it tasted like a new leaf. If this story touched you, please like, share, comment, and subscribe.